Okay, so when you think of South Carolina, what pops into your head? Probably sunny beaches, right? Maybe historic Charleston, sweet tea on a porch swing. And yeah, that's all there. But that's just the postcard version. Underneath that charming surface, there's a state with a shocking history, some really strange geography, and a whole lot of wild secrets.
Let me ask you, do you really know South Carolina? Because we're about to peel back that curtain and look at a place of sunken pirate ships, bizarre Cold War accidents, and a history that might just challenge everything you thought you knew. Let's get into a totally different side of the American South.
For starters, let's talk about the ground itself. You know, the East Coast is supposed to be geologically stable, right? Well, not in 1886. An earthquake centered near Charleston was so unbelievably powerful that the shock waves traveled over 1,000 miles and literally rang church bells in Boston.
Not just the land that's holding secrets. The coastal waters here are basically a graveyard for actual pirate ships, including the flagship of maybe the most feared pirate of all time, Blackbeard. We're talking a real piece of pirate history, just sitting down there in the dark.
And you go deep into the swamps. And what do you find? The fossilized remains of giant ground sloths and other massive prehistoric creatures. So let's recap. We've got massive earthquakes, pirates, and ancient monsters. Yeah, I think it's safe to say South Carolina is way more than just beaches and charm.
All right, first up, let's just blow up some of the biggest myths right off the bat. This first part is all about uncovering the state's surprising identity, starting with a bit of a classic rivalry.
Okay, so everyone knows Georgia is the peach state, right? Maybe it's on their license plates, it's their whole brand. Well, about that, turns out South Carolina has a pretty serious claim to that title.
Here's the proof. It's not even close. South Carolina doesn't just produce a few more peaches. In a typical year, its harvest is more than double what Georgia produces. So the next time you bite into a super juicy peach, just remember, there's a really good chance it came from the actual peach capital.
You can forget the idea that South Carolina is just one big flat coastal plain. Head up to the northwest corner, and the landscape just completely transforms. You're in the rolling Blue Ridge Mountains. And from Sassafras Mountain, the state's highest point, you can get these incredible views into 4 different states on a clear day.
The surprises aren't just what you can see. For this next section, we're going to go a little deeper, kind of literally. We're going underground and underwater to uncover a hidden history of geological mysteries and some amazing lost relics.
Across the coastal plain, you can find thousands of these things called Carolina Bays. If you ever see them from the air, it honestly looks like a giant shotgun blast hit the East Coast. They're just thousands of these perfectly shaped ovals, all pointing in the exact same direction. What makes them so weird? Well, you've got thousands of them. They're all perfect ellipses, and they're all aligned the same way. For years, scientists figured it must have been a meteor shower. Now, the leading theories have more to do with wind and water. But the truth is, nobody knows for sure. It's a real, genuine geological mystery.
There's this absolutely terrifying story from the Cold War. Back in 1958, a B-47 bomber was flying overhead when a single faulty pin caused it to accidentally drop a nuclear bomb. The conventional explosives inside this 7,600-pound weapon went off on impact, leaving a massive 75-foot crater in a quiet neighborhood.
Miracle. But the bomb's nuclear core wasn't installed, so there was no atomic blast. A house was destroyed, a family was injured, but nobody was killed. You can still go see the crater today. It's a literal scar from the day the Cold War almost went hot in a South Carolina backyard.
Secrets just keep coming, even underwater. The Hunley, a submarine from the Civil War, made history as the first sub to ever sink an enemy ship, and then it just vanished. For over 130 years, it was a total ghost story. Then, in 1995, they found it, perfectly preserved in the coastal mud, like an anaerobic time capsule from a whole different era.
Okay, so this next section is all about the raw power of nature in the state. We're going to look at a world of really dramatic extremes and some bizarre contrasts that just completely defy expectations.
If you want to understand the power of the coast, just look at the Morris Island Lighthouse. When they built this thing, it was a quarter-mile inland. Today, it's standing all by itself, completely surrounded by water, nearly 2,000 feet offshore. The ocean literally ate the island right out from under it.
That lighthouse? It's not some isolated case. On a place called Boneyard Beach, you can watch this destructive power happening in real time. The ocean is actively swallowing a whole forest, killing the trees and bleaching them bone white, creating this hauntingly beautiful graveyard right there in the waves.
Extremes aren't all about destruction. Some are just plain weird. The city of Columbia is famous for being incredibly hot. Summer days can easily hit 100 degrees, but the Saluda River that flows right through town is a frigid 55 degrees. It's actually cold enough to support a trout fishery. It's all because the water is released from the very bottom of a nearby lake.
How about a biological extreme? Check out Baum Island on Lake Murray. Every summer, it becomes home to the biggest purple martin roost in all of North America. We're talking close to 1 million birds. When they all take off in the morning, the cloud of birds is so massive, so dense, that it actually shows up on Doppler radar looking like a hurricane.
So for our final section, let's bring it all together and connect these really unique landscapes to the people who live there. We're going to see how South Carolina's geography hasn't just shaped a state, but has actually influenced the culture and the history of America itself.
The state's coastal geography created this incredibly unique cultural haven. On the isolated sea islands, enslaved people from West Africa were able to preserve so much of their cultural heritage, their language, their food, their traditions, way more than those on the mainland could. This very isolation gave birth to the distinct Gullah Geechee culture that's still thriving there today.
Here's a fact that might just completely reorder your mental timeline of American history. We all learn about Jamestown in 1607, right? But decades before that, in 1566, the Spanish established Santa Elena on what is now Parris Island. And this wasn't just some little fort, it was the capital of Spanish Florida, a territory that stretched all the way to Newfoundland.
For centuries, the location of this capital was totally lost. It was eventually found buried under a Marine Corps golf course. Just think about that for a second. The first major European capital in what would become the U.S. was right there in South Carolina. Which really leaves us with one last question. If an entire capital city can vanish under a golf course, what other incredible secrets are still out there waiting to be discovered right under our feet?